I'm George Galloway and I present Kalima Horra on Al Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. Kalima Horra means free word. That's what I speak. So Kalima Horra is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Al Mayadeen television. Welcome to Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, for Al Mayadeen television, coming to you from London, discussing Iran via Warsaw. Why do I mention Warsaw? I seldom do, but the United States and the Polish government have recently organized what can most kindly be described as a fiasco, an attempt to build a front for war with Iran. Well, that's if you believe Netanyahu's first tweet on the matter. He later changed it to confronting Iran, combating Iran, but the Hebrew word that he used in his initial tweet was definitely war. That's what they were seeking, a war front against Iran. And though the entire thing collapsed into disrepute and ridicule, failing completely to produce a single piece of paper, a communique, or even a photograph with all the participants, we have to take it seriously. It had several purposes. One of those was to divide Eastern Europe from Western Europe. The Western European countries, having refused Trump's withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, refused to implement the sanctions on Iran that Donald Trump has implemented. The US government has rather shrewdly spotted that their satrapies in Eastern Europe are more easily bought than countries like Germany and like France. Its second purpose was to put in a single frame the Israeli leadership and the Arab leaders who are ready to sign up for this war front against Iran. Typically, the Arab leaders who did attend were so gutless that despite sitting down with Netanyahu, despite planning to go to war alongside Netanyahu, they weren't yet prepared to be in the same photograph as him. And the third purpose was to further belligerently encroach upon Iran's sovereignty. Now, Napoleon and Hitler learned the hard way the lesson of fighting a war on two fronts. Donald Trump's not as clever as them. He is fighting not just on two fronts, but multiple fronts, but two particularly large fronts that have one important thing in common: oil. He is preparing for war against Venezuela and Iran in the same electoral cycle. Or is he? That's one of the questions I'm putting to our audience of distinguished experts and one or two enthusiastic amateurs like me here on this program today. Is this all Trumpian bluster? It's a family show. I could put it more crudely, but is it just Donald Trump passing wind? Wind and fury. Because that's what he did in North Korea, isn't it? He created a casus belli, took us to the brink of war with North Korea, and then discovered that his new best friend was little Kim Jong-il, formerly the little rocket man, now his little best pal. Is he going to eventually sit down for a McDonald's, halal, with the Iranian leadership? Is this all just a bluff? If it is, it certainly has exposed the quisling Arab governments who are ready to belly dance for Benjamin Netanyahu and for Donald J. Trump. I just want to say this. It's maybe the only opportunity I will get. Iran is not Iraq in 2003. It is not Afghanistan in 2001. Iran is more than capable of fighting back and is determined to do so. And when I look at the performance of the US military, 15 years in Afghanistan, fighting the Taliban who are about to re-enter the government house in Kabul, who already control more than 60% of the territory of Afghanistan. When I look at Saudi Arabia's military performance in Yemen, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. I cry over all the children that they've managed to kill. I cry over all the civilians that they have minced. But I have to laugh at the military prowess at some of these Arab countries now lining up with Netanyahu and Trump to confront Iran. It's my belief that if the United States attacks Iran, it will get, if I may put it in English, a bloody good hiding. And so will all those who join up with it. These are my views. They may or may not be the views of our audience. We'll soon find out who's going to be first. Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, a distinguished commentator, writer here in England. What do you think?
Thank you, George, and thank you for having me back on. George, can I just say a few words, first of all, about the Iranian Revolution, which, of course, Iran recently marks the 40th anniversary of. It's very important for people in the West to understand that the Iranian Revolution gave the country of Iran back to the Iranian people. The Iranian Revolution restored Iranian dignity, self-respect, because prior to 1979, prior to the revolution, under the Shah, Iran was a vassal state, a client state of America, and it's a gut-wrenching feeling to know that the Iranian people, who are the heirs to the Persian Empire, the descendants of Cyrus the Great, Darius the Great, Xerxes the Great, were merely pawns to the United States. So that's important to recognize on the 40th anniversary of the revolution. Now, turning to the American threat to Iran, well, I believe that with Trump in the office, this constitutes an opportunity in a lifetime to those on Capitol Hill who want to take military action against Iran. I think that is a very significant difference between himself and his predecessors, especially someone like Obama. However, we also have to acknowledge that Iran has been used to this threat from America for 4 decades. And in those 4 decades, Iran has achieved a great deal of strength. If we have a look at the economy, the Iranian economy is robust. It's robust enough for the Iranian military to be fighting legally in Syria against terrorism. Also, Russia, in the last 25 years, Russia and Iran have formed a strategic relationship politically, economically, and militarily. Now, I know that in Iran, there are still suspicions about Russia because of the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran in 1941, and also through how Russia was helping to arm Saddam Hussein to the teeth during the Iran-Iraq war. But nonetheless, Russia, especially in this current climate, is going to be extremely important to the national security of Iran. And I think thirdly as well, just touching upon your point about if America did choose the option of war, as you said, Iran is not like other Arab countries. The Iranian military is extremely powerful, is extremely well-led, extremely well-motivated. And I say this not in a sentimental, romantic way, but the Iranians are natural fighters. And I believe people in Washington are aware of that. Now, that's not to say that America could not win a war against Iran. Well, America is a superpower, but I don't believe they will go for that option. Why? Because of the cost that would be involved, the cost to America, the cost to their allies, the Gulf dictatorships, in particular Saudi Arabia. The only way, in my opinion, that America would win a military contest with Iran would be literally or virtually to destroy Iran as a country, and only then could the Americans be successful. But in summing up, I don't believe the Americans will go for that option. The conference in Warsaw was a disaster. The only countries who sent foreign ministers were the Gulf dictatorships. No surprises.
And Britain.
Then, yes. But even the hosts, George, Poland, they said afterwards that we still support the nuclear deal with Iran. But nonetheless, these are more dangerous times because Trump is in office, and we just have to see what follows.
Well, you're right to remind us that in comparatively recent history, both Britain and Iran, both Britain and the United States, effectively overthrew the elected government in 1953 in Iran in their sinister plots. The Shah was basically a servant to them, a factotum of the empire, and of course they abandoned him at the last, a lesson to all such factotums, that they are entirely dispensable when the empire has no further use for them. And also, of course, to mark the 40 years of achievement of the Iranian Revolution, not least in the military field and in the motivation of its military and indeed paramilitary forces. I agree with you that war is not certain. It's extremely risky. But I think you'd agree with me that we're closer to war with Iran than we have been hitherto. Who'd like to? Yes, sir. Another distinguished commentator.
Thank you very much, George. It's always a pleasure to be back on your show again. Just to follow up, my name is Shabir Razvi, Director, International Finance Solutions Associates in London. Just to follow up from Marcus, he made some really important clarities for our discussion today. But I think what we have to look at in reality is further back than 1953 when Mossadegh was overthrown, because Iran has been a challenge to the West from the tobacco concessions, which were not given in the 1890s to the British, to the constitution movement of 1906, 1953, and subsequently the Islamic Revolution. So it wasn't an overnight success. There was a whole 55 decades of work that went on prior to the advent of the Islamic Revolution. So generations upon generations felt that Iran needed to be independent of the British, of the Europeans, and any kind of interference that was taking place in Iran. So that's one issue that we need to understand. Secondly, no matter which political spectrum that one is in Iran, whether you follow Rouhani or opposed to him or so-called moderate, one of the interesting things about the Iranian nation that I believe as a non-Iranian observer from the outside is the clarity of vision that all the Iranians have. Whether they're rich or poor, they're very nationalistic. Therefore, they will stand up to any kind of interference from Washington, London, or Paris. And I think they have shown that very clearly over the last 40 years. I don't want to go through the achievements of what the last 40 years have provided for the Iranians. I think there are other competent guests who will, I'm sure, elaborate on that. But I do want to say on the discussions that were taking place in Warsaw, which you started your opening comments with, Mr. Pence was talking about the three H's, the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah. I would tell Mr. Pence that really America and Washington is following hyperbole, hysteria, and hate insofar as Iran is concerned. The three H's that emanate from Washington are pure hate against Iran. And I think if there were psychiatrists or psychologists in the audience, they would show what hate leads one towards. Complete blinkered vision, no strategy, just really saying things of the hoof. The other thing you must also remember that whilst the conference was taking place in Warsaw of these so-called leaders of the 60 nations, Mr. Giuliani, the former New York mayor, was also giving a speech to a terrorist organization who wants to overthrow the government in Tehran. So you had Giuliani there, you had Mr. Pence, you had Mr. Pompeo, and you had Mr. Kushner. If you like, the quartet.
The four horsemen of the apocalypse.
The quartet.
To be fair, the terrorist organization in question paid Mr. Giuliani rather a lot of money for his speech.
Absolutely, the quartet in Quagmire, I would say.
You're good. You are good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You inspire me, Tweety.
Who'd like to speak next? Yourself, sir?
Hi, my name is Pai. I'm from London. With these sanctions being put in place by Trump, the thing that really is different from previous sanctions is how it used to be put in place by Obama or the Bush era. They used to put more effort into it. They used to try to engineer consent. They used to go around and speak to other countries to bring them on board. And with Trump, what you see is that mask is off, and they just do as they like, as they deem it fit. And he is more. One of the reasons people like him in America is because he just say it like it is. So
he's more Sopranos than Ivy League.
Exactly. My personal opinion of him is that he's not as dangerous and as warmonger as Obama and Bush were. Obama, he still did a lot of really nasty things, but he put a nice mask on, and he tried to justify it through the art of rhetoric.
He was the lipstick on the pig.
Exactly. With Trump, how I assess him until this point, he talks a lot of rubbish, but he does not act on it. What's important for me, as an observer from outside, is does he actually go to wars? So far, he did not start any wars, but yes, there were killings, but less than the Obama era and
that's
the Bush
true,
era.
I did open that possibility right at the beginning. This could all be a big act. The problem is, around Trump, even if you and I agree on that thesis, around Trump are some of the most dangerous and wicked men on the earth. From Elliot Abrams on the Venezuela front to John Bolton on the Iran. And if I may quote Oscar Wilde, or paraphrase him, Trump bears the impression, like a sofa, of the last man that sat upon him. I don't mean that literally, although who knows. He may well, on a bad day, with the ratings plummeting and Mueller closing, he may well decide to wag the dog in Hollywood terms and essentially divert attention from his own difficulties with an actual war. Now, who's next? You, sir?
My name is Majid Tafreshi. I'm historian and political analyst. I've got some point about Warsaw meeting. First of all, it's shameful after helping the whole nation of Iran to Polish refugees in Second World War. Thousands of refugees came to Iran, and lots of good relation between Iranian and Polish people. This meeting happened in Warsaw. But this meeting actually united Iranians, even the genuine people who have a problem with government inside Iran, especially when you saw, as gentlemen mentioned, the MEK Mujahideen Khalq terrorist organization supporting this meeting somehow with meeting with Giuliani, who is not only former mayor but advisor to Trump now.
Trump's lawyer.
Trump's lawyer, yes, legal advisor. And
mind you, most of Trump's lawyers end up in jail.
Exactly. This is the elements you can see can easily unite Iranians, no matter pro-government or against government. That's the first point. Second point is, in this meeting, you can see that they tried to sort of fabricate or copying, according to themselves, which is wrong actually, sort of Guadeloupe things to topple the Iranian government, which is totally went wrong. And I think the outcome wasn't against Iran. I'm not saying it was good, but it wasn't as bad as they thought. If you listen to Mike Pence's talk in Munich summit, you can see his disappointment about other European countries not following him against Iran. I'm not saying the three countries countries like France or Germany or United Kingdom are genuinely supporting the JCPOA deal, but they are not supporting Trump at all for their own reasons, different reasons. At this moment, we are confronting with two paradoxical points. When Trump and his friends talk to Iranians, they say the missile system of Iran, the military capacity is rubbish, they are toys, they are wasting Iranian money, and they are helping other countries, and this is, people are hungry and they are making missiles. When they talk to international community, they say it's dangerous, it's very capable, it's targeting West, it's targeting Europe and America, and it's dangerous when we should stop it. I don't know whether it's toy or it's very dangerous. This is very paradoxical point that they're always attacking or targeting Iranian or non-Iranians with these fabricated stories. The last point I want to make is, if you want to unite Iranians and push them to forget all problems they have, the corruption, mismanagement, you should talk to Trump. He's very capable to unite Iranians together.
There's much more of this coming up. Stay tuned. You're watching Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming from London, talking about Iran. Earlier, we took the Kalima Horra camera onto the streets of London to hear what the people thought. Let's take a look.
Why do you think so many countries in Europe have decided not to sanction Iran in line with the Trump administration's request?
I mean, if you look back in history, most of the time when the US decided to go against the European advices and the UN decisions, it went pretty badly. Look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan, Vietnam.
So I suspect that, you know, what's happened is that it's become a lot more, that people have become more malleable to whatever the immediate political needs are in those European countries.
The thing is now Europe changed its policy a little bit.
Because I feel that some of the countries they get their oil from the country that the US wants to sanction.
I think because there's a lot of corruption in politics, and to me, it's worse since Donald Trump is voting as president.
Do you think that Iran can keep its economic integrity despite the fact that it has sanctions on it?
No, I don't think so.
I'm not too sure, but I would say no. I would say no.
I think yes. Yeah.
Well, this is very personal for me. I wrote a play about this. Sorry, a little plug there, but it's true. This is a country that is still battling with modernity and tradition.
Iran is already in a pretty bad place. They live out of the exportation of oil, and their economy is in a pretty bad place right now. So I think the sanctions are just going to drag the country down. It's going to be really bad.
And do you think that Iran might suffer social unrest similar to what we've seen in Venezuela?
Yes. Yes, they would. If Donald Trump remained president, they will.
Yeah, I think so.
Because the situation's so desperate. It's so desperate that for both countries, for the peoples of both countries. And of course also they're surrounded by, you know, countries that have got everything. And the countries that have got everything are telling them they're not allowed to have anything. You're going to end up with hyperinflation, like, you know.
I think Iran is people, they support their government, and as a nation supports them, I don't think that the same thing will be in Iran.
Very interesting collection of views from the streets of London, but also a fair bit of pessimism, Doctor, about the economic war No one really there imagining the US is going to invade, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, as we say, and economic sanctions is one way. Last word from you.
I think the sanctions are very heavy this time, or even heavier than other time. But remember, if you look at the even British official documents at the National Archives, you can see the sanctions started right from the beginning of the revolution. If I ask me, I can say just before revolution, a few days before that, when they thought everything is finished. And but this time, obviously, is the worst phase of the sanctions. But the sanctions this time is, in a way, is not as bad as Obama's time, because there is no unity against Iran, because the European countries try to avoid it. This is not good enough for Iran, but I think Iran learned the lesson. The sanction is not good. Iran is not happy with the sanctions, but they are working against that, and till now they are not going in the way as Venezuela went. Iran is not Venezuela, is far from that, politically, militarily, and economically. And I think it's wrong if they think Iran can be another Venezuela or another Iraq or Afghanistan. It's a very bad
Let me just
mistake.
pick up on one of those points that you made. Venezuela is surrounded, in Brazil, Colombia, with countries that are effectively agents for the United States. But so is Iran. How significant is that?
The countries you mentioned about around Venezuela, they are real countries and independent states. But the countries in the south of Iran are against Iran. The Emirates, especially Abu Dhabi, Sheikhdom, as well as the Saudis and others, you can see them during the revolution and during the war. They are just following United States. One day, Mr. President Saddam Hussein, but another day, Mr. President Trump, say the race Saddam, say the race Trump. They are always asking big brothers or big fathers to help them. They are nobody against Iran.
Sir.
Abu Saud, retired engineer from London. What I like to point out, recently I've seen a video that, as we know, any country who oppose Israel, they are reprimanded by our Uncle Sam. And recently, in 1976, Shah of Iran had a relationship with Israel. They had embassy.
Very close, yes.
And a lot of Jews were living for yonks.
Still, until now,
until
Iran
now,
has
there
a
are
very large Jewish
very large number of people living there. In 1976, what he said, Iran are against Israel, it was his word. And we do not like them to come against us. What I can feel, they're making a conspiracy to demean Iran. And that was it. It was picked by CIA, and then we have seen in 1979, his government was toppled, come back with Iranian revolution, Islamic revolution. But after that, we have seen Iran has done great strive to become one of the powerful country to oppose those countries who are against them. But what we see eventually, the Americans were gagging Iran. They were blocking Strait of Hormuz to stop oil. Germany, China, and India and Japan was the big importer of, and somehow they have managed it, but Iran has come back. They're producing nearly 85% of their defense equipment and medicine. There are certain medicine they cannot produce. Now, a good point you mentioned about Warsaw, as they see Western Europe is not budging towards United States, they say, oh, let's try this, the weaker one. And I'm glad to see Iran is holding up to that, and I wish them well. Thank you.
The European Union's highly politicized decision to recruit all these Eastern European countries wasn't thought through properly, neither in terms of the economies of these Eastern European countries, the implications for freedom of movement of cheap labor from these countries, and also their accessibility to US interference. And so, yeah, again, chickens come home to roost. Would like to speak? Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for having me in your show. My name is Ali Reza. I'm a student here in London. In case of war and all of the threats from America against Iran for war, one of the main reasons is the internal reasons of America. They want to finance their campaign, obviously, for future. They want to make IPAC happy. That's one of the reasons. They want to make the Zionist parties happy inside America. That's one of the reasons that they raise the issue of war with Iran. But actually, they're not going towards it because they know of the cost. The other reason is to threatening the Gulf countries, Persian Gulf countries, against Iran. So they will buy more weapons from Iran.
From America?
From America, sorry, from America. So most of the reasons are financial reasons behind the issue of raising the war against Iran. Even if America wants to start a war with Iran, like it wanted before, they have their proxies against around Iran, like Saddam Hussein before.
But the proxies are completely incapable now. Saddam Hussein had a formidable army and and military force, but the countries like the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia cannot be compared to Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Or Israel, for that matter. I mean, you see, Netanyahu is gagging for a war with Iran, but not between him and Iran. Mussolini used to go around the world threatening people with Hitler's army. And that's what Netanyahu and indeed the Saudis are doing now. They're threatening Iran with America's army. Question is America ready to pay that price? Shabir, let me ask you this. We heard, as I said, quite a bit of pessimism there from people about Iran's ability to withstand this economic war. But one of the consequences, I was just reading the other day, that the US sanctions on China are hugely boosting Russian-Chinese trade. The same is true in Iran, isn't it? That the more Western sanctions there are on Iran, the deeper becomes Iran's economic relationship with Russia, China, Turkey to some extent, India also. How did you feel when you saw that pessimism?
I think it's sort of because the information that is available to the general public is from our mainstream media, which is harking on a daily basis that Iran is the failed state. Iran is not able to cope with the sanctions. Iran is, going down the tube. These are the messages that are coming.
It's actually not true at all.
Absolutely.
By the way, it's not even true in Venezuela, but go on.
Indeed. On the pure economic point of view, the angle that you were sort of asking me was, yes, absolutely. Over the last 40 years, Iran is not at the beginning of the revolution when an 8-year war was leashed on Iran, and Iran survived that war and the sanctions during the war, prior to the war, and continuously for the last 40 years. China was not a power on the horizon at that time. Russia was the Soviet Union, former communist state. Therefore, it had a different agenda at that time. India wasn't the powerhouse that it is now. Indonesia wasn't there. So all kinds of new nations have come on the horizon. South Africa was doing trade with the Shah of Iran at that time. And it was Imam Khomeini who recognized Mandela, and Mandela had the courtesy at that time to regard Khomeini as his leader. So lots of things have changed in the last 40 years, which has made Iran's relationship and not to be dependent on the Washington consensus so profound that actually the losers are going to be Washington and those who follow Washington diktat.
Who else would like to speak who hasn't yet spoken? Yes, sir.
Desmond Thompson, ex-publisher. I want to say that the driving force of this is Zionist Israel. And it's nothing new. It hasn't happened within the last 10 years. I can go back until 1967 when I was involved in publishing a book on the real way of the Six-Day War. And in that we exposed the greater plans of Zionist Israel. And they had targeted Iran as one of their vision of opposing forces that they had to get rid of. So coming back into present time, there's a huge, massive effort from Israel through AIPAC in the States, but they have another organization nicknamed as called ACOC Politics. And they are more underground and more hidden, and they are bribing, and I use the word bribing, through legal means to sponsor senators and congressmen to vote for billions of dollars for Israel military use and anything against Iran. The UK government in its various forms since August of 1914 has been involved in now over 100 years' war. It has never stopped. Every single year they're involved somewhere in some war, whether small, medium, or large. And they're, of course, since World War II, due to Churchill, the breakdown of the handover of the British Empire, they have become a vassal of foreign relations to Washington. So it's no surprising that the UK government is involved in these discussions, such as in Poland, etc., because they want to be involved and they have to follow the Washington foreign policy. Thank you.
You know the last year that Britain wasn't at war?
Long time ago.
1772.
I thought the Falkland War was the last one.
1772. And Iran hasn't invaded any country for 300 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's similar like North Korea. The Koreans had never invaded any country for 5,000 years.
There's much more coming up in the last segment. Stay tuned. You're watching Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming from London, talking about Iran, talking about the Warsaw Conference, the attempt to turn the economic warfare of the United States into a readiness, perceived readiness at least, of military action and another regime change operation. We've been talking about how Iran is standing up to that economic warfare and how prepared it is, or would be, to stand up to the real thing. Let's continue the debate. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Joshua from London. Being a former geography student, I mean, I'm not a military strategist, but having some insight into the topography of Iran, I think that even someone as ignorant as Trump knows that being a country of over 1.5 million square kilometres, being so mountainous as well, and having a reasonably large population, it's now in excess of 80 million, okay, and it's slowly increasing, although comparatively slower than most of its neighbours. He knows he would be foolhardy to stage an actual land invasion. I think, given that he has such a high opinion of himself as a businessman, not that that's true, of course. He's been declared bankrupt 7 times. Yeah. One for each sin. I think that he's going to try and wear them down with economic sanctions. This is only speculation, but he's going to try and wear them down with economic sanctions until he can bring them to the bargaining table. Because ultimately, America does want something from Iran. It is not simply sort of like a move of prestige. It wants its oil, and he is going to try and bring them into a economic zone of submission where they can't refuse any offer he makes. And he did actually in interview, but I think at some point in the middle of last year, he did say he would leave the door open for dialogue under no preset conditions with the Iranians. He actually did unequivocally say that. So
he never says anything unequivocally.
Well, no, of course. But in particular, that is...
Dorothy Parker said when told of the death of Calvin Coolidge, how could they tell? I'm not sure that anyone can really tell what Donald Trump said, never mind his thinking.
No.
Let's go to the back of the hall. Yes, madam.
My name is Cheryl. I'm representing the Caribbean today. I'm from Trinidad. I've got just a couple points. The reason why America hates Iran, I think go back to 1979 and that revolution. I think they're the only country, I could be corrected if somebody knows better, they're the only country that managed to kick that CIA's U.S. embassy nest out for good. And that is one big victory. I think everybody's still cheering. I don't think USA has gotten over that, so they've got some psychological issues. And as you said, they really need to see a psychiatrist about that. They're still bearing Iran in their chest. Secondly, Iran will never, ever become a vassal state of the USA, and they better get that in their head, their silly heads in Washington. The third thing is that Iran's position on the Palestinian situation remains the same. They're resolute that the petition that the UN did in 1947, November 1947, they're not going to buy into that. They still want the Palestinians at the table taking part in that discussion, which never happened. So they're not going to move on that either.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Doctor, let me come back to you. For Israel, of course, the steadfastness of Iran's view on the Palestine question is an existential threat to them, because they're used to Arab countries that pay lip service in the past, now don't even bother with the lip service, used to give words rather than deeds, now don't even bother with the words. Iran, for all these decades, has sincerely and wholeheartedly supported the Palestinian cause in words and in deeds. Do you think in Iran there's any regret about that steadfastness? If they had sold the Palestinians like all the others did, they might not be in such trouble.
If you look at the Iranian situation before the revolution, you can see that all Arab countries used to blame Iran or insult the Iranian government to be the only country in the Middle East who has good relation with Israel. Now the situation is the other way around, and Iran is the only country supporting Palestinians genuinely. And there are some debates in Iran that how we can support this Palestinian issue, but there is no problem even within the genuine opposition inside Iran, not the people who are taking money from Israel or Saudis or United States, that the Iranian government should support Palestine. But the problem is there are not enough debate to the detail of this question. There are two very quick points I want to raise. First of all, in Warsaw conference, the Iranians realized the target is not the Islamic Republic of Iran. The target is Iran, no matter who is ruling Iran. They want to crush Iran as an entity and a big state, big government in the region, the one and only ever independent in the Persian Gulf and that specific area. No one think they are only thinking about Islamic Republic Iran as Pompeo try to sell this issue that we are not against Iranian people, we are against Iranian government. That is totally nonsense. Iranians think this conference is against the whole Iranian national interest, nothing to do with the government personally. The second point is, in the last 40 years, no matter you like Obama or not, the only time that Iranians came to talk to Americans and had to deal with them, that was the time the United States started to talk to Iran with respect and dignity. And if Trump thinks he can do other way around, you can see the situation since Carter and the rest of the presidents that they cannot deal with Iran without dignity and respect, and they cannot force Iran to accept whatever they want. If they talk to dignity and respect the Iranian people, Iranian history, and Iranian government, they can talk to Iran and deal with Iran. Otherwise, it's not possible. That's a nonsense and it's a nightmare. It's not a dream, it's a nightmare.
Dr. Marcus, what's the possibility, 1 to 10 or in a percentage, that this will end with Trump sitting down with my distinguished former constituent, President Rouhani, for whom I procured a council house in a high block of high flats in Glasgow many years ago. He still owes me a high flat, council flat in Tehran in return. He hasn't replied to my request on that. The sanctions, exactly. But seriously, how likely is it? Is it possible that this is all bluster, like the Korean bluster, and that Trump will tell Bolton to sit down and be quiet? Is there any chance of it, do you think?
Well, I think anything is possible, but I think in this situation it's highly improbable. I don't think there is really any realistic prospect of any American official meeting with their Iranian representative, such as the vicious, spiteful, malignant propaganda that has been emanating from America against Iran for the last 40 years. I mean, the average American has been conditioned into having a visceral disliking of all things Iranian, so that's just not going to happen. But if I can quickly just pick up on the sanctions point, but first of all, in regard to China, people need to be aware that it is not in China's interests to challenge American global hegemony, because China's economic progress in the last 40-odd years has been based more or less on its trade with America. And when I talk to Chinese officials, they reiterate that point. But the sanctions on Iran, the Iranian economy was at its most vulnerable in the 1980s and the 1990s. The 1980s, because that's when the sanctions were biting, that's when the war was occurring with Iraq. And then in the 1990s, of course, the Iranian economy was suffering as a result of the consequences of that dreadful war. So in my opinion, I'm optimistic. If the Iranian economy was able to survive the 1980s and the 1990s, then it's going to survive now. The Iranian economy is more robust than what a lot of people realize. And of course, the other factors, as I mentioned, cited earlier, the power of the Iranian military, the fierce patriotism of the ordinary Iranian man and woman, and the support from Russia. That is why, put together, I am optimistic. And the Iranian military, if we compare it to Saddam Hussein's military, during the war, on paper, the Iraqi military was far superior than its Iranian counterparts. But what happened during that war? That's what I mean when I said earlier, the Iranians, unlike some others, are natural fighters. And that is something the Americans have to take into consideration if they really want a war with Iran.
Last word, sir.
George, I think we've a bit too much focused on Iran. And the point of focus needs to be on the states that are going to follow US sanctions. Is Iran going to survive in sanctions or war? Definitely, yes. But regarding the states that are going to follow up Trump and his sanctions on Iran, that's the most important question, because one thing that worries me the most is US economical hegemony in the world is far too powerful. Still, dollar is being used a lot in the international transactions. And I'm hoping for a day that that hegemony is no longer exists. Now, when I think about how state leaders will react as the pressure of sanctions will be increased, like the gentleman explained earlier, now it is at a stage where US is refusing to extend any more sanction reliefs. Now this is where it gets a little bit more serious. And what is important is which state leaders will be on Trump's side and which state leaders will actually say no to it. Is EU actually going to stand up at that point and say, no, even if you sanction me, I will still be on Iran's side?
I think the EU has. The problem is the companies in the EU. Whatever the EU says, the companies inside the EU are afraid of the wrath of the United States, afraid of losing US markets and so on. Shabir.
Thank you very much, George. Just want to sort of conclude my comments today. You started with Oscar Wilde, and I'll try to sort of complete with Oscar Wilde. When Oscar Wilde first arrived in New York back in 1890s, the immigration and the custom officers asked him, "Have you got anything to declare?" He said, "Nothing except my genius." So if they ask the Iranians, "Have you got anything to declare?" the Iranians will say, "We have nothing except genius to declare."
It's utterly beautiful to finish on the immortal words of the greatest of all Irishmen, Oscar Wilde. I would conclude with a lesser mortal, Harold Macmillan, the British Prime Minister in the 1950s, who said, "It's never one damn thing, it's one damn thing after another." They hate Iran because, yes, it kicked out the CIA and the American embassy. They hate Iran because it has faithfully supported the Palestinian people. They hate Iran because it's something different. It's not worshipping the dollar, it's worshipping God. They hate Iran, perhaps most significantly in modern times, because Iran has changed the paradigm in the Middle East. If not for Iran, Iraq would be a puppet state of the United States of America. If not for Iran, the defeat of the government in Damascus might well have occurred, and regime change might well have happened. They hate Iran for all these reasons, and these are all good reasons to stand with Iran. It's been marvellous for me. I hope it was for you. It's been Kalima Horra on Al Mayadeen Television. Thank you for watching.